The first impossible thing about the human transmission was not that it crossed 12 guarded borders. It was that it was addressed to the dead. Admiral Valen Orr sat beneath the living crystal dome of the Accord vessel, quiet verdict, and listened as the signal repeated across every military channel in the outer march. It was a human voice, raw with exhaustion, speaking in trade cant, Accord High, 6 extinct dialects, and one language that should have existed only in sealed funerary archives. To whoever still remembers how to dream, do not answer. Do not follow the song beneath Meridian Reef. We are holding the lock with our hands. The bridge crew watched the waveform coil across the central display like a silver nerve. Below them turned Meridian Reef, a broken blue-white planet ringed in frozen ocean fragments and industrial mirrors. It belonged to humans by accident, according to Accord records. A failed survey claim, a maintenance colony, 12 domes, 3 orbital foundries, population barely 2 million, no sanctioned jump vessels, no coherent planetary government, no cultural unification index, no threat. And yet they had just broadcast in the ritual tongue of the Thrani, a species the Accord had declared extinct 400 years before humans had invented radio. Signal authenticity? Valen asked. Crude carrier, brilliant routing, said analyst Shea. Her tendrils flickered pale green with unease. They bounced it through derelict weather shells, ice mining reflectors, and our own border warning buoys. It is not a recording from the archive, it is live. Humans cannot read Thrani. They are reading it now. Valen's mandibles pressed together. The Accord did not call itself an empire. Empires were loud, hungry, childish things. The Accord was older than that. It was the answer to disorder. It found fractured species before they became dangerous, surrounded them with law, removed their sharpest instincts, and taught them peace so gently that most eventually thanked their keepers. Humanity had been scheduled for alignment within the decade, not conquest, never conquest. The Accord would offer stability, heal their wars, consolidate their governments, correct their reckless mythologies, and place them under guidance until they matured. But Meridian Reef had forced the schedule forward. Open a formal channel, Valen said. Full ceremonial authority. The crystal dome dimmed. Behind him, the sevenfold sigil of the Accord unfolded in blue fire. 7 open hands around a sleeping star. Quiet verdict was not built to terrify. Its hull was a kilometer of pearl armor and harmonic veins, surrounded by 23 escort craft whose weapons could paralyze a continent without cracking a window. It was an alignment vessel, designed to end wars before armies realized they had begun. The human image appeared after a burst of static. She was younger than Valen expected. Human ages were difficult, but this one could not have lived more than 3 decades. Her hair was shaved on one side and clotted with frost on the other. She wore a patched pressure jacket over a medical harness. Behind her, lights flickered in a corridor that looked half-flooded. Someone off-screen was coughing hard enough to break bone. This is Chief Leona Vale, acting coordinator of Meridian Reef Emergency Command, she said. Any vessel approaching the lower atmosphere will trigger a failure cascade. Hold position beyond the 3rd ring. No title suitable for planetary authority. No honor guard. No attempt at diplomacy. Valen leaned forward. Chief Vale, I am Admiral Valen Orr, appointed Hand of Alignment by the Serene Accord. Your settlements have entered unauthorized possession of restricted linguistic and technological material. Your present instability endangers your species and others. Under Article 9 of Protective Intervention, Meridian Reef will accept Accord supervision immediately. Leona Vale blinked once. You didn't listen. A few officers shifted in irritation. Valen let a measured pause pass. Primitive species often mistook panic for clarity. We heard your warning. We reject its premise. We are not warning you because we think we can stop you, she said. We are warning you because stopping you is the only thing giving us time to keep everyone alive. Everyone. Her eyes flicked toward something off-screen. Then the whole human corridor shook. A deep note rolled through the transmission, not sound exactly, but pressure that made Velan's skull plates ache through the speakers. Behind Leona, every visible human froze, not in fear, in listening. A child's voice whispered somewhere in the background. It sang again. Leona turned back to the screen. "Admiral, you have engines that harmonize, communications that synchronize, fleet minds that coordinate on shared pulses. Everything about your vessels is the wrong shape for what is under this planet. If you come closer, it will hear you better." Analyst Shea whispered, "Unknown energy rise from the northern abyssal trench." Velan lifted one claw. Silence returned. "Humanity has a remarkable gift for interpreting ignorance as destiny," he said. "You are standing on a fractured colony world with failing power and stolen words, threatening the most disciplined fleet in civilized space with a monster story." For the first time, Leona's face changed. Not anger, not fear, something worse. Pity. "We thought it was a monster too," she said. Then it started asking for names. The transmission cut. Quiet verdict drifted above Meridian Reef in cold, offended silence. "Primitive intimidation," said Captain Rune, whose throat fins shimmered with contempt. "Permission to deploy a compliance probe." "Granted," Velan said. "Non-lethal. Map their command infrastructure. No bombardment unless attacked." A compliance probe slid from the flagship's flank, a needle of ivory alloy wrapped in a resonance field. It descended through broken rings of ice and old human satellites. Beneath it, Meridian Reef glittered, shattered oceans frozen into ridges, storm systems crawling around black water, human domes clinging to cliff shelves above trenches deeper than continents were wide. The probe broadcast peace codes. Its resonance field could turn missiles aside, blur targeting systems, and gently disable crude electronics. There was no human device in Accord files capable of touching it. A human vehicle rose from the upper atmosphere. For several seconds, the bridge systems classified it as debris. It was a cargo lifter, boxy and asymmetrical, with landing legs still attached and insulation peeling from its belly. Its engines coughed blue flame. It wobbled. It nearly hit a dead satellite. Then it steadied and continued climbing straight into the probe's path. "They are intercepting with a freight elevator," Captain Rune said. The cargo lifter opened. Not a weapon bay, a harvest bay. Thousands of black seed-like objects spilled into space, each no larger than Velan's smallest claw. The compliance probe's resonance field adjusted automatically. It ignored them. Then the seeds woke. They were not machines in the Accord sense. They had no guidance cores, no proper signal discipline. They were agricultural micro-drones, the kind humans use to pollinate algae farms in sealed habitats. Each carried a reflective wing, a pinch of mineral dust, and a burst capacitor. They scattered randomly. The probe moved through them. The first capacitor popped, then 10, then hundreds. Tiny bursts of chaotic static, light, dust, and magnetic scratches detonated against the resonance field from every angle in no pattern at all. The probe's harmonics adapted, over-adapted, corrected for corrections that contradicted one another, and began singing against itself. "Field instability," Shea said sharply. The cargo lifter slammed its harvest claws shut around the probe. It should have shattered. Instead, the claws folded, buckled, broke, and held just long enough for the lifter to vent a stream of freezing algae slurry directly across the probe's resonance nodes. The slurry flash froze into dark green armor. The probe vanished from Accord sensors. Captain Rune stood. "They have blinded it." "No," Shea said slowly. "They have made it disgusting." The bridge watched as the human lifter, shaking itself apart, dragged the disabled probe into a higher orbit and left it spinning harmlessly between two ice boulders. A new transmission opened. Leona Vale appeared again, breathing harder now. Blood ran from one nostril. Behind her, two humans were sealing a door with a manual wheel, while black water seeped through the seams. "Your probe is intact," she said. "The field nodes are clogged, not destroyed. Retrieve it when this is over." Velan stared at the frozen green lump that had been Accord technology refined across 8 centuries. You understand this constitutes aggression. I understand your probe was still singing after we told you not to sing. What is beneath Meridian Reef? Leona did not answer quickly. When she did, her voice was quieter. A room the Accord forgot to close. The screen died. Velan ordered the fleet to remain beyond the 3rd ring. It was not obedience. It was information control. It was operational patience. It was the correct response to an unknown local hazard and an unexpectedly inventive lesser species. At least that was what he recorded in the log. 2 hours later, Meridian Reef's northern hemisphere went silent. Not dark, silent. Every storm on the planet stopped moving at once. Clouds froze mid-spiral. Lightning hung in the atmosphere like cracked veins. The oceans below the ice rings flattened, as if an invisible hand had pressed them down. Then, from the trench called St. Aura's Descent, a light rose upward. It was the color of memory before grief. No Accord sensor agreed on its shape. Optical arrays saw a tower. Gravimetric nets saw a wound. Thermal systems saw a body at the moment of death. The crew's implants translated the surge into fragments of song, then into voices, then into their own childhood fears. Quiet verdict shuddered. Every harmonic vein along its hull rang without being touched. Across the escort line, formation engines tried to synchronize against the disturbance. The moment they did, the light beneath the planet turned toward them. "Break harmony!" Shay screamed. "Break harmony now!" Too late. The escort craft Gentle Doctrine bloomed from within. Its hull did not explode. Its crew did not die in fire. Instead, the ship filled with pale figures that were not there, thousands of them pressing their hands against every viewport from the inside. Then the vessel emptied. No wreckage, no debris, no bodies, just an open channel carrying one sentence in the extinct Thrini tongue. We remember the door. The human emergency network erupted across local space. No speeches, no threats, only voices shouting over one another. Lock teams report. North locks failing. Keep the children below blue line. Do not answer anything using your own voice. Manual cruise to Gatehouse 12. Sing different. Sing wrong. Keep it confused. Then Leona Vale's voice cut through, hoarse but steady. "Admiral, get your fleet out of rhythm." Velan looked down at the planet humans were holding together with freight lifters, algae drones, manual wheels, and exhausted voices. For the first time in his career, he gave an order the Accord did not teach. Scatter formation. 31 days after Meridian Reef, the Serene Accord convened an emergency tribunal inside the Chamber of Gentle Conclusions. The chamber orbited the garden world Oathspire, where the Accord had signed its founding compact beneath trees genetically preserved from the homeworlds of 7 elder species. Its walls were translucent, showing continents below arranged in perfect agricultural spirals. Nothing disorderly had been permitted within 5,000 kilometers of the chamber for 9 centuries. Admiral Velan Orr stood alone beneath 7 suspended judges and told the truth. The human colony possessed partial knowledge of an active mnemonic phenomenon beneath Meridian Reef. Their warnings were specific. Their improvised methods disrupted Accord harmonics more effectively than standard countermeasures. The loss of Gentle Doctrine occurred after our vessels maintained synchronized engine fields despite human warnings. Judge Eshkal's feathers tightened. "You attribute the destruction of an Accord escort to song. I attribute it to a phenomenon that responds to patterned cognition and harmonic machinery. The humans call it the sleeper below." The humans are not authorized to name restricted phenomena. Velan's gaze did not move. They are the ones currently surviving it. Murmurs flickered through the upper tiers. Minister Tal Wren, keeper of historical quarantine, leaned forward. "Your report also states that humans broadcast in Thrini funerary dialect. Explain." I cannot. That is insufficient. It is accurate. Before the minister could reply, the chamber doors opened without ceremonial permission. A courier entered at a run, stumbling over the polished root floor. Several judges rose in outrage. The courier dropped to both knees. A vessel has appeared in the inner sanctum lane. Judge HFY's eyes narrowed. Appeared how? Without filing arrival geometry, without using a recognized accord gate, without a harmonic wake. The chamber's central air filled with projection. The ship above Oathspire looked like something dragged from a battlefield, drowned, repaired by criminals, and dared to fly anyway. Its hull was layered in ceramic scraps, asteroid iron, white ice armor, heat-blistered cargo plating, and sheets of translucent coral from Meridian's oceans. Enormous cable loops held external tanks against its spine. Whole sections rotated at different speeds. Its engines did not sing. They coughed, flared, paused, and reignited in stubborn bursts. On its flank, painted by hand in 12 human scripts and 3 alien ones, was a name: Patchwork Saint. It opened every civilian channel in the system. A human man appeared. He had deep burns along one cheek and a silver brace around his throat. His uniform was clean only in the places that had recently been patched. Behind him stood a bridge crew made of humans, 2 insectoid medics, a scaled child wrapped in emergency foil, and a figure Valen recognized from historical quarantine files. A Threni. Impossible. The species had vanished after the Accord's 3rd stabilization age. Officially, they had chosen dissolution rather than integration. Their culture was recorded as beautiful, unstable, and safely concluded. The living Threni on the human bridge was thin enough to be translucent. Its 4 eyes were covered with dark cloth. Its hands trembled around a human mug. "This is Commander Jonah Pike of the Meridian rescue vessel Patchwork Saint," the human said. "We request public hearing before the Serene Accord. We are carrying 819 survivors recovered from sub-oceanic containment vaults beneath Meridian Reef. We are also carrying evidence that those vaults were built under Accord authority." The tribunal became noise. Judges shouted for channel control. Ministers demanded military containment. Oathspire traffic filled with panicked civilian signals. Commander Pike raised one hand. The projection shifted. A corridor appeared. Not human. Accord architecture, unmistakably old. All curved white ribs and harmonic script. But the walls were cracked. Black water poured down them. Human rescue teams moved through waist-deep flooding with lamps tied to their shoulders. They dragged cryo caskets on sledges made from torn door panels. A woman in a diving suit beat on the glass of one casket with a wrench until it opened. Inside was a Threni child, alive. Then another image. A chamber beneath an ocean, built around a circular aperture sealed by 7 harmonic locks. Around the locks stood rows upon rows of memory cradles. Threni and others. Species erased from migration charts. Bloodlines declared extinct. Cultures mourned in Accord museums. Their dreaming minds were wired into the locks. Minister Tal Wren whispered, "End the transmission." The transmission continued. Commander Pike's expression did not change. "We tried to wake them quietly. The system fought us. Then the locks began failing. Then the thing on the other side started speaking through the people you left inside it." Judge HFY's voice sharpened. "You will dock immediately under Accord guard. The survivors will be transferred to appropriate care. Your records will be examined for contamination." "No," Pike said. The word struck the chamber with indecent simplicity. "You are inside the Accord heart," the judge said. "You have no leverage." Pike looked tired. Valen had seen exhausted soldiers, broken rebels, supplicants, zealots, and prisoners. This was none of those. This was a man who had already decided which bones he could afford to lose. "We have leverage," Pike said. "We have witnesses. We have every open civilian channel in Oathspire. We have the Threni archive language your censors forgot to remove from emergency nursery songs. We have 12 hours of footage from under Meridian Reef, and we have a problem coming toward you faster than your fleets can run." The chamber dimmed, not by order, by shadow. Every tree below Oathspire released pollen at once, a defensive reflex from ancient genetic memory. The continents glittered gold beneath the orbital chamber. Analyst reports erupted across the tribunal displays. Unknown mnemonic surge beyond outer defense halo. Harmonic gates destabilizing. Civilian sleep networks reporting shared nightmare intrusion. Then the oldest Threnny aboard the Patchwork Saint lifted its covered face. It spoke softly. "The lock is open enough to smell you." The Accord sent Valan to the human vessel because he had seen Meridian Reef and because, as Minister Tal Ren phrased it, his judgment was already contaminated in a useful direction. The docking tube to Patchwork Saint groaned under mismatched pressure cycles. Accord vessels made no sound unless designed to. Human vessels seemed to communicate constantly through knocks, hisses, drips, clanks, curses, and handwritten warnings. A human woman met Valan at the airlock with a tool belt, a sidearm, and a bowl of something steaming. "Admiral Orr?" she asked. "Yes. I'm Reyes, ship systems. Duck under anything marked orange. Step over anything marked blue. Anything marked with a skull was put there by children and might still be accurate." Valan's escort stiffened. "This vessel passed through inner sanctum security?" Reyes gave a thin smile. "Security expected a ship. We arrived as 12 ships having an argument." They followed her through corridors that looked impossible to standard engineering. Part of the ship's gravity was rotational, part was local, part seemed to be everyone agreeing not to jump too hard. Refugees filled every compartment. Some slept in cargo netting, some floated in water tanks made from fuel bladders. Human volunteers moved between them with blankets, tools, medicines, food paste, and quiet voices. Valan saw a Threnny elder sitting beside a human boy. The elder's hands trembled too badly to hold a cup. The boy held it for him without speaking. The gesture caused something small and unpleasant to open inside Valan's chest. Commander Pike waited in a converted storage bay. A table had been bolted to the deck, then bolted again when the first bolts had clearly failed. Around it sat humans, 2 Threnny, 1 rescued alien Valan could not identify, and Chief Leona Vale appearing by unstable hologram from Meridian Reef. She looked worse than before. One eye was bandaged. Her left arm hung in a brace. Behind her, humans were still turning manual wheels. "Admiral," Pike said, "we appreciate you coming aboard. You entered restricted orbit with stolen citizens and classified material." Pike nodded. "That is one way to describe a rescue. Those vaults were under historical quarantine. They were under an ocean with living people inside." Minister Tal Ren's representative placed a formal data prism on the table. "The Accord offers emergency amnesty for Meridian personnel if all survivors, records, and linguistic artifacts are surrendered immediately. Humanity will withdraw from Oathspire and accept supervised debriefing. Public channels will be corrected to avoid civil panic." For a moment, the room heard only the ship's old metal complaining. Then Leona Vale laughed from the hologram. It was not amused. "You still think the truth is something you can put back in a box?" Pike touched the table. A crude display unfolded. It showed Meridian Reef's suboceanic structure. 7 locks, 6 failing. The 7th surrounded by human-built braces, welded supports, chemical batteries, analog timers, and bodies in pressure suits working in shifts with no sleep. "The vault was built to keep something from entering cognitive space," Pike said. "The people in your cradles were not prisoners by accident. They were dreamers. Their minds generated conflicting memories strong enough to keep the aperture unstable. You used living cultures as lockpins." The Accord representative's voice went cold. "You cannot understand technology from an age before your species held fire." "No," Pike said, "but we understand cruelty when it has a power cable." The Threnny elder beside him removed the cloth from one eye. Beneath it was not an eye at all, but a silver socket filled with shifting dark. "When we slept," the elder said, The Accord called us honored guardians. When we woke, we remembered screaming. No one spoke. Valon had spent 200 years enforcing alignment doctrine. He had ended civil wars, prevented extinctions, removed tyrants. He had stood in burning cities and believed order was mercy because the alternative was ash. He had never asked how much ash had been swept beneath the roots of Oathspire. "What is coming?" Valon asked. Pike's eyes moved to him. "The thing behind the aperture. Humans call it the sleeper because that was the safest word our children could handle. The Threni call it something that translates badly." "It translates," the elder said, "as the hunger that learns your mother's voice." The lights flickered. A deep pressure rolled through the ship. Every Accord implant in Valon's skull spasmed. Across the bay, humans winced but kept working. The Threni began humming different melodies under their breath, each one deliberately out of rhythm with the others. Reyes leaned into the doorway. "Commander, Outer Sanctum reports dream bleed. 3 civilian habitats just had the same childhood memory at the same time. Accord sleep nets are amplifying it." Pike stood. "How far?" "Close enough to knock politely." The representative reached for his communicator. "Accord Command will take operational control." Pike turned toward him. "Accord Command is wired into every Harmonic gate, DreamNet, Peace Archive, and Fleet Choir around this world. Your whole civilization is a dinner bell." Valon stared through the small viewport at Oathspire below, perfect and shining and full of sleeping billions connected by gentle neural systems that kept nightmares from becoming trauma, grief from becoming violence, dissent from becoming war. The Accord had built peace by teaching minds to hum together. Now something in the dark had learned the tune. The first emergency order from the Serene Accord was elegant, centralized, and catastrophic. All defense halos synchronized. All civilian sleep networks entered shelter mode. All orbital habitats locked into unified calm protocol. The effect was immediate. Across Oathspire, billions of frightened minds were soothed into the same breathing rhythm. Ships formed perfect protective spirals. Gates aligned into radiant geometry. Every system did exactly what Accord doctrine required in crisis. The shadow beyond the outer halo opened like an eye. Oathspire's night side lit with faces in the clouds. Children saw dead grandparents at windows. Soldiers heard old enemies forgiving them. Judges saw the worlds they had corrected speaking with mouths full of roots. The defense halo fired coherent lances of white energy. The lances bent, slowed, and returned as lullabies. 3 orbital platforms vanished into sleep, not destruction. Worse. Their crews remained visible through windows, standing motionless, smiling at someone no one else could see. Patchwork Saint lurched as its human engines fired out of sequence. On the bridge, Reyes shouted over alarms, "They're making it stronger!" Commander Pike opened a channel to the tribunal. "Shut down the sleep nets, break fleet formation, kill Harmonic gates, wake people up, let them be afraid individually." Judge Eshkal appeared, feathers ragged with stress. "Mass panic will kill millions. Shared calm will kill everyone. You ask us to abandon the foundation of Accord civilization based on human instinct." Leona Vale's hologram glitched beside Pike. "No, based on human experience. Panic is survivable. A predator with a perfect map of your minds is not." Minister Tal Ren's representative snapped, "You are contaminating command channels with primitive trauma logic." Reyes looked up from her console. "Primitive trauma logic kept our species alive through ice ages, plagues, wars, vacuum leaks, reactor fires, and your classified nightmare basement." Pike raised a hand. "Enough." He turned to Valon. "Admiral, can you override local fleet harmony?" Valon's first instinct was refusal. His second was doctrine. His third was the memory of gentle doctrine vanishing while humans shouted at him to scatter. "I can issue emergency contradiction codes," he said. "Most captains will reject them unless a tribunal judge confirms." "Can you make them hear you before they reject?" Yes. Then make them hear this. Pike stepped aside. The Serene Elder stood, supported by a human medic on one side and the unidentified rescued alien on the other. Its voice shook, but the old funeral language carried across every Accord command channel. We were not extinct. We were used. The lock is open because the sleepers were stolen from their dreams. If you continue the song, the hunger will wear your peace like skin. The channel filled with silence. Then Valen added his command seal. By Preservation Clause 1, all fleet vessels break harmony. All captains assume local manual control. Shut down coherent engines. Disable sleep nets. Disconnect gates. This is not a drill. This is not alignment. This is survival. Judge Eshkal's face hardened. Admiral, or you exceed authority. Valen looked at the human bridge, at the refugees, at the ugly ship, at the planet below. Yes, he said. Finally. He sent the codes. Across Oathspire, the most graceful machine in the galaxy began to stutter. Ships fell out of formation, some too late, some barely. Civilian habitats lost their calming lights and woke to terror. People screamed in different languages, cried at different pitches, prayed to different gods, cursed different officials, remembered private griefs instead of shared dreams. The shadow slowed. Then it changed tactics. It's moving toward the root archive, Reyes said. The projection shifted to the planet below. At Oathspire's equator stood the root archive, a continent-sized neural garden where the Accord stored the memories of every aligned species. Not raw memory, corrected memory, cured memory, history without rage, loss without accusation. The archive's living trees connected through the planet's crust to every civic mind net in the system. It was the Accord's heart. It was also the largest harmonized memory structure ever built. Pike looked at Valen. Can it be shut down? Not quickly. Its roots are biological, planetary, and sacred. Can it be opened? Valen recoiled. To uncorrected access? That would release centuries of unrest. Leona Vale's voice cut in. Admiral, the thing chasing you feeds on the lie that everyone dreams the same. So give it the truth. The idea moved through the bridge like a blade drawn slowly from a sheath. Open the root archive. Release every sealed contradiction, every corrected atrocity, every forbidden rebellion, every grief the Accord had softened into compliance. Not just to scholars, not to judges, to everyone. Minister Tal Ren's representative went pale. That would fracture civilization. Pike said, civilization is already fractured. You just trained everyone not to feel the break. The shadow reached the inner halo. Patchwork Saint rolled hard as a sleeping platform drifted into its path. Human pilots cursed, cut thrust, fired side jets, slammed the ship through a gap too narrow for sanity, and scraped 3 layers of armor off the hull. Commander, Reyes said, we can make a run at the root archive uplink, but we're too slow to outrun that thing afterward. Pike's face settled into that dangerous human stillness. What do we have that's loud? Reyes laughed once. Everything, nothing, depends how much ship you want left. As much as possible, not as much as necessary. Valen heard the meaning beneath it. Humans did not worship sacrifice. They hated it. That was what made it terrible. They did not die because death was beautiful. They died because a door had to stay open and no better hand could reach it in time. Pike opened ship-wide. All crew, Saint's burden. The response came instantly. No cheers, no speeches, movement. Humans became a storm inside their own ship. They pulled refugees into reinforced compartments. They strapped Serene elders into crash webs. They welded doors that might never open again. They handed children to strangers and told them to keep breathing. They ripped decorative panels out of rescued Accord shuttles and turned them into signal reflectors. They loaded agricultural drones, emergency beacons, kitchen timers, broken music boxes, medical monitors, toy recorders, and prayer chimes into launch tubes. Valen watched a human engineer give her pressure hood to a rescued alien who had no compatible suit. The alien resisted. The engineer shoved it into their hands and said, "I know where the air leaks are. You don't." Then she ran toward the leaking section without a hood. This was the human advantage, Valen realized, and it was unbearable to witness. Not strength, not even courage alone. Accounting. Humans calculated loss at intimate scale. They counted seconds of air, meters of corridor, number of hands, weight of children, distance to valves, probability of pain, chance of anyone making it. Then they moved before the math could become despair. Patchwork Saint descended toward Oathspire. Accord ships scattered around it, some obeying Valen, some not. Those that kept harmony drew the shadow like blood in water. The hunger passed through them, leaving crews alive and dreaming, ships intact and empty of will. The human ship did not harmonize. It rattled, coughed, sparked, disagreed with itself, and lived. "Atmospheric entry in 30 seconds, Reyes shouted. "We were not built for this." Pike gripped the command rail. "We were built by people who hate that sentence." Patchwork Saint hit Oathspire's upper atmosphere wrapped in broken ice armor. The sky burned. Pieces of hull tore away. External tanks exploded in sequence. Heat shields made from Meridian coral glowed blue, cracked, and shed sheets of steam. The ship descended not like a spear, but like a toolbox thrown by a god. Below, the root archive spread across the equatorial continent, a forest of luminous trees connected by rivers of thought light. Its central uplink rose from the canopy, a spiral tower grown from living crystal and ancient bone. Valen had visited it once as a child. He had placed his hands against the roots and felt the peace of 1,000 worlds, agree that pain could be made useful by removing its teeth. Now he saw those roots from above and understood them as cages. Reyes launched the first wave. Thousands of human objects scattered into the burning sky. Not missiles, noise. Every piece broadcast something different. A grandmother's recipe, a mining alarm, a child laughing, a human argument about whether soup counted as a meal, a field recording of rain on old Earth, heartbeats, static, poems, engine diagnostics, swears, lullabies sung off-key, names of every survivor pulled from Meridian Reef, names of every human who had drowned keeping the 7th lock shut. The hunger turned away from Oathspire's cities and toward Patchwork Saint. It appeared behind them as a curtain of pale faces, each one wearing an expression stolen from someone's memory. Reyes looked at her instruments. "It's following." Pike nodded. "Admiral, the archive." Valen opened the root command channel. Judge Esh Kal blocked him. Her face appeared across the display, surrounded by failing tribunal lights. "Admiral Orr, if you open the archive, there will be no return to order." Valen looked at the shadow behind them. "There is no return. There is only what we stop lying about." "You would let humans dictate the soul of the Accord?" "No," Valen said. "I would let the dead speak before the living are eaten." He overrode her with every authority code he had ever been trusted with. It was not enough. Minister Tal Wren's representative, still aboard Patchwork Saint, stared at the console. His hands hovered, shaking. "You have keeper access," Valen said. The representative swallowed. "If I use it, every sealed conclusion opens, every corrected war, every sanctioned erasure, every mercy killing, every false extinction. Worlds will tear themselves apart." Pike turned to him. "Maybe, or maybe they will finally know where the wounds are." The ship shook. A bulkhead burst. Air screamed through the bridge until Reyes slammed a manual patch over the crack with both arms and her own body. The representative looked toward the refugee compartments. A Threni child was watching him through the doorway. Not accusing, just watching. His hands moved. The root archive opened. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then Oathspire remembered. The planet did not scream. It exhaled. Across continents, citizens woke into memories the Accord had polished away. A river species remembered its drowned parliament. A mountain people remembered the day their gods were renamed weather patterns. Soldiers remembered firing on protesters under orders later deleted. Parents remembered children taken for protective relocation. Entire languages returned in the mouths of those who had never been taught them. The hunger convulsed. It had followed harmony. It had fed on agreement. It had learned to wear grief only after grief was made uniform. Now billions of minds broke in different directions at once. The shadow frayed. Reyes shouted, "It's losing cohesion," Pike asked. "Enough?" "No," she said. "It's still anchored to the Meridian lock pattern. It needs one more contradiction big enough to choke on." Leona Vale's hologram flickered alive on the cracked display. Behind her, Meridian Reef was flooding. The seventh lock chamber had split open. Humans stood around a circular aperture with cables looped around their suits, holding manual clamps shut while black water rose to their chests. The light behind the aperture pulsed like something breathing. "Jonah," Leona said, and for the first time her voice sounded afraid. "We can sever from here, but if we do it cold, the backlash hits Oathspire." Pike's face went gray. "What do you need?" "A mind on both sides of the signal bridge, someone aboard you, linked to our lock, feeding it noise while we cut. Someone with a memory profile messy enough to survive partial contact." Reyes whispered, "Human." Leona did not deny it. Pike took one step forward. Every human on the bridge moved at once. "No," Reyes said. "I'm closest to command link. You're also the only one who can fly this brick after we fry half the spine." Pike looked at her. "Reyes." She shook her head. "Don't use the voice." Valen watched them with a horror he could not place. Accord officers argued through rank. Humans argued through love, which was far more dangerous. Then a voice came from engineering. "Commander, stop making noble faces. I already patched myself in." The screen changed. Chief Technician Amara Sato appeared from the lower engine deck. She was strapped into a maintenance chair that had been welded in front of an open neural diagnostic rig. One side of her body was bandaged. Her hands were steady. Pike's face broke. "Amara, disconnect." "No. That is an order." "I rewired the board. Your orders are currently connected to a coffee heater." Reyes let out a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. Amara looked past them, toward Valen, toward the Thraney, toward every open channel her signal could reach. "Admiral, your people built a lock out of stolen dreams. We are going to break it with one volunteered nightmare." Valen could not answer. Amara continued, her voice softer. "Jonah, tell my sister I was extremely annoying at the end." Pike gripped the rail until blood darkened his knuckles. "I'll tell her you were brave." "She knows that. Tell her annoying. Accuracy matters." Leona's voice came from Meridian. "Link in 10 seconds." Amara closed her eyes. The diagnostic rig lit. Human memory entered Accord systems like weather entering a cathedral. Not clean, not disciplined, not curated. A flood of contradictions. A childhood kitchen with a cracked window. A mother singing badly while repairing a water pump. A first funeral. A schoolyard fight. Hunger. Jokes told during evacuation drills. The smell of burning insulation. A hand held in a hospital. Shame. Anger. Love. Stubbornness. Regret. 1,000 small failures that had not ended her. 1,000 fears that had not owned her. Every memory tangled with another, refusing to become one lesson, one song, one shape. The hunger seized it and could not make it agree. At Meridian Reef, Leona Vale shouted, "Cut!" The humans in the flooded lock chamber pulled their clamps. The aperture opened fully. For a heartbeat, the universe leaned inward. Then Amara Sato screamed. Patchwork Saints engines fired beyond redline. Its mismatched core opened, dumping raw magnetic turbulence into the signal bridge. Around the ship, Every noise beacon detonated at once. The root archive poured uncorrected memory upward. Meridian's seventh lock shattered. Oathspire's billion awakened minds cried out separately. The hunger tried to become all of it. It became none. The pale curtain folded into itself. Faces tore into light. The song broke into fragments too different to be music. The shadow shrank, not vanishing but retreating through the torn aperture of its own attention, dragged backward by a contradiction it could not learn. Patchwork's saint fell out of the sky. For 12 seconds, nobody controlled it. Then Commander Pike, with tears on his face and one arm hanging useless, reached across the dead console and pulled a manual lever painted yellow, blue, orange, and skull-marked by a child. Emergency balloons deployed from the ship's belly. Accord engineers would later argue for years about how a vessel that size survived atmospheric impact on inflatable heat-resistant cargo bladders. Humans would answer accurately, barely. Patchwork Saint crashed into the root archive's outer marshes, plowing a trench through luminous trees and coming to rest half submerged in golden water. It did not explode. This was considered a triumph by everyone aboard who remained conscious. Above Oathspire, the shadow was gone. Across the system, sleep platforms woke. Crews wept without knowing why. Judges heard citizens demanding answers in languages that had not been legal that morning. The defense halos drifted silent. The harmonic gates stayed dark. On Meridian Reef, the seventh lock chamber flooded completely. When rescue divers reached it 2 hours later, they found Leona Vale alive, tied to the manual clamp with both arms broken and her pressure mask cracked. Around her floated 9 humans and 3 Thrini who had stayed to cut the aperture loose. 4 were dead. The rest were still holding the line. Amara Sato never woke. Her body survived. Her breath continued. Her brain produced electrical storms no Accord physician could interpret. Human doctors sat beside her anyway, reading messages from her sister, playing bad music, arguing near her bed about reactor design, and refusing the phrase empty shell so violently that Accord translators flagged it as a weapon. The Serene Accord did not collapse in one night. It was too old, too rooted, too useful in places, too loved by some, too feared by others. Ancient systems rarely fall like villains in children's stories. They fracture, they deny, they rename crimes as unfortunate architecture. They form committees. They promise limited transparency. They blame dead founders, rogue ministries, emergency doctrine, translation errors, impossible circumstances, and, for several desperate hours, humanity. But the root archive was open. No hand could close every door again. Within a day, 7 aligned worlds suspended neural calm protocols. Within 3 days, 14 species demanded access to their uncorrected histories. Within a week, Accord peacekeepers on 5 planets refused orders to suppress memory gatherings. Old songs returned in markets. Forbidden mourning colors appeared on public towers. Children asked why their grandparents cried when certain stars rose. Humanity did not stand above it all as conqueror. Humanity was too busy. Human engineers crawled through Oathspire's broken sleepnet hubs, installing manual cutoffs. Human doctors treated Accord citizens whose minds had never been allowed to feel untreated grief. Human translators worked with Thrini survivors to reconstruct languages that had been museum pieces the week before. Human pilots flew food into cities where automated distribution had failed because the central calm protocols were down. They argued constantly, with the Accord, with rescued species, with each other. They broke protocol, slept in corridors, mislabeled sacred equipment, angered 6 ministries by drinking tea in a memorial zone, and accidentally introduced labor negotiation tactics to a planet whose workers had not realized refusal could be organized. But when a child woke screaming in an Oathspire hospital because 300 years of inherited fear had returned at once, it was a human nurse who sat on the floor beside her and said, "You don't have to make sense yet." When an Accord captain confessed that his ship had transported dreaming prisoners without knowing what they were, it was a human tribunal advocate who told the crowd, "Truth first, punishment after. Otherwise, punishment becomes another hiding place." When Meridian Reef's domes began failing from the damage done during the lock collapse, 72 human vessels arrived without waiting for treaty status. They were not warships, not by any sane definition. They were salvage barges, fuel haulers, hospital cylinders, farm wheels, jury-rigged ice tugs, old colony ships, private craft, and one museum vessel that still had sails because humans apparently preserved obsolete technology in working condition for reasons that made Accord engineers whisper at night. Together, they called themselves the Open Window Fleet. They brought welders, water, seeds, trauma teams, portable courts, printed habitats, analog radios, spare hands, and 1,000 lamps. Admiral Velan Orr watched them arrive from the damaged observation deck of Patchwork Saint. The ship had been lifted from the marsh and held in a cradle of Accord-grown roots and human scaffolding. Its hull looked worse than before, which human crew described as consistent. On the side, beneath the hand-painted name, someone had added Amara Sato's silhouette, surrounded by tiny marks from every species rescued from Meridian Reef. Commander Pike stood beside Velan, leaning on a brace because human bones did not forgive atmospheric crashes quickly. Below them, Oathspire's root archive glowed wild and uneven. Some trees were dying. Some were blooming in colors no Accord botanist had recorded. Crowds gathered among the roots, speaking memories aloud so others could verify them. Judge Eshkal arrived without escort. Her feathers had lost their ceremonial polish. She looked older than she had during the tribunal, though only days had passed. "Commander Pike," she said. "Admiral Orr." Velan inclined his head. Pike waited. The judge looked through the viewport at the human fleet entering orbit. "There are factions claiming your species engineered this crisis to weaken us." Pike's mouth twitched. "Did they see our ship?" "They claim its ugliness was strategic camouflage." "It was budget." The judge did not smile. "Others claim humanity now intends to replace the Accord." Pike was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Replace it with what? We can barely agree on lunch." "This is not an answer." "It is more of an answer than you think." Judge Eshkal's eyes narrowed. "You arrive at our heart. You expose our crimes. You help disable our central systems. You hold public trust across worlds that once feared us. Yet you ask for no throne, no tribute, no surrender oath. I do not understand what humanity wants." Velan did. Not fully. Perhaps no one did. But he had begun to see the shape of it in their corridors and crash protocols, in their refusal to leave strangers underwater, in their maddening habit of building manual handles onto doors their own governments might someday lock. Pike looked down at Oathspire. "We want the doors open," he said. The judge's feathers tightened. "You keep saying this word. Because closed doors hide screams. Open doors invite chaos." "Yes." The judge stared at him. Pike continued, "We are not bringing purity. We are not qualified for that. Humans have built cages. We have erased people. We have called violence order and fear security and greed destiny. We know the shape of the thing because we have carried pieces of it ourselves." He touched the brace at his throat. "That is why we distrust any civilization that says it has finally solved people." Velan looked at him sharply. Pike's voice remained quiet. "People are not solved. They are fed, heard, argued with, protected from monsters outside and monsters inside, given exits, given witnesses, given tools when the perfect systems fail." Judge Eshkal looked back toward the root archive. "And if the old Accord breaks completely," Pike answered without grandeur, "then tomorrow morning, everyone who is still alive starts building something less cruel." The judge was silent for a long time. At last she said, "That is a frightening philosophy." Pike nodded. "It has been a frightening universe." Months passed before Meridian Reef's final evacuation ended. Not everyone left. Humans rarely did anything as one species unless chased by physics, and even then, someone usually requested a vote. Some colonists chose to remain in the repaired domes, guarding the sealed remains of the aperture with Serene volunteers and Accord defectors. They called the place not a prison, not a shrine, but a warning station. Leona Vale stayed. When asked why, she flexed her rebuilt hands and said, "Because if something knocks again, I want someone rude answering." The Serene began rebuilding too, though not as the Accord expected. They did not gather on one world. They scattered deliberately among many, planting memory houses in human stations, Accord cities, free moons, and ships that would take them. They said a culture once used as a lock should never again have only one door. The Serene Accord became the Open Accord after 47 brutal assemblies, 3 attempted coups, 2 fleet mutinies, and 1 public apology so poorly worded that humans, Serene, and 6 former judges spent 9 hours revising it line by line while the entire galaxy watched. Admiral Valen resigned before he could be dismissed. Then, to everyone's discomfort, he accepted command of a joint rescue service whose charter required every vessel to carry independent communication channels, manual overrides, historical access rights, and at least one human engineer empowered to say, "That seems like a terrible idea," without being arrested. His first ship under the new charter was not elegant. Humans had helped design it. This explained much. On the day Patchwork Saint finally left Oathspire, thousands gathered in orbit. Accord vessels, human barges, Serene memory skiffs, free world transports, former peacekeepers, hospital ships, private craft, and small family shuttles filled the sky. No harmonic anthem played. No centralized calm protocol softened the moment. People felt it raw. Grief for the dead, rage for the stolen, shame for obedience, fear of what came next, hope so sharp it almost hurt. Commander Pike stood at the airlock as the last refugees from Meridian Reef boarded their chosen vessels. Beside him, Reyes argued with an Accord engineer about why the new emergency release had to be kickable. The engineer insisted no civilized safety system should require kicking. Reyes replied that civilization was what happened after the kick worked. Leona Vale appeared by transmission from Meridian, scarred, exhausted, alive. "Try not to crash that thing again," she told Pike. "No promises." "Terrible, Commander. Accurate coordinator." She smiled faintly and cut the channel. Valen approached, carrying a small object wrapped in cloth. Pike glanced at it. "What's that?" Valen unfolded the cloth. Inside was a child's warning tag from Patchwork Saint, a crude skull painted in black, with 3 words beneath it in messy human letters. "Might be important." "I found it near the manual lever that saved your ship," Valen said. Pike smiled for the first time that day. Then it was correctly labeled. "I would like permission to keep it aboard my new vessel." "You're asking permission to steal trash?" "I am asking permission to preserve doctrine." Pike studied him. Then he nodded. "Granted." Across the dock, a Serene child ran toward Valen. She had been among the first pulled from the flooded vaults, though no one knew how long she had slept there. She carried a small lamp made from human scrap metal and root archive glass. Its flame was artificial, uneven, and warm. "Admiral," she said. Valen knelt carefully. "I am not an admiral now." She considered this. "Were you the one who made the ship stop singing?" "I was late." The child held out the lamp. "Late is a kind of arriving." Valen accepted it. He had received medals from 7 worlds. He had carried surrender keys from tyrants, peace wreaths from grateful councils, ceremonial blades from species who once hated him. None had made his hands tremble. This did. Patchwork Saint's departure lights flickered, not because ceremony required it, because the ship still had wiring issues. Across the harbor, vessels began lighting lamps in their windows. Human lamps first, then Serene, then Accord, then species whose true names had only recently returned to their own mouths. One by one, they glowed against the dark until Oathspire's orbital lanes looked less like a controlled network and more like a field of fireflies refusing formation. Pike watched them from the airlock. Judge Eshkal, standing nearby, said quietly, "Your people do this often? Lights and windows?" "When someone might be trying to find the way home," Pike said. "And if they do not come?" "Then the light still tells the dark it did not get everything." The judge had no answer to that. Patchwork Saint moved away from the dock under uneven thrust. Its hull was scarred, its engines coughed. Its armor did not match. It carried refugees, evidence, patched systems, bad coffee, memorial walls, sleeping children, exhausted humans, stubborn aliens, one unconscious engineer who was still spoken to every day, and enough manual overrides to offend every elegant mind in known space. Valen watched it go and remembered the first human transmission. To whoever still remembers how to dream, do not answer. He had thought then that humans were frightened primitives, standing between civilization and a local disaster they could not comprehend. He had seen their ugly machines, their fractured command, their improvised defenses, their exhausted faces, and mistaken disorder for weakness. Now he understood. The Accord had built harmony vast enough to quiet wars. It had polished grief until it reflected obedience. It had made peace into a song so perfect that billions forgot how many voices had been silenced to keep it pure. But when the thing beneath memory opened its mouth, perfection had nearly fed the galaxy to it. What saved them was not harmony. It was a cargo lifter full of algae drones, a broken colony holding a lock by hand, a rescue ship that arrived as 12 ships arguing, a technician who wired her final fear into a nightmare no predator could swallow. Humans with mismatched tools, humans with uncorrected grief, humans who knew fear intimately and still walked into flooded rooms because someone inside had not yet been counted among the dead. Far below, the root archive continued to bloom in impossible colors. On Meridian Reef, Leona Vale stood in the rebuilt gatehouse and listened to the quiet beyond the sealed aperture. Around her, humans and Serene and former Accord engineers worked in shifts. No one sang in harmony. No one slept connected. Every door had a manual handle. Every warning was written in more languages than protocol required. In the medical bay of Patchwork Saint, Amara Sato's fingers moved for the first time in months. The nurse beside her froze. Then Amara's cracked lips parted, and she whispered one word: annoying. The nurse laughed so hard she cried, and within minutes the whole ship knew, and within hours the story reached Meridian, Oathspire, the open window fleet, the Serene memory houses, and 100 worlds still learning how to feel their own history without permission. Across those worlds, lamps appeared in windows, not identical, not synchronized, not commanded, just lit, one, by hands that had chosen to remember. And somewhere beyond Meridian Reef, in whatever dark listened for perfect songs, there was no answer it could follow. Only billions of living voices, broken and brave and different, refusing to become music for monsters.